Hello, everyone. Today we are looking at a return to isolationism, a change in American foreign policy. We're going to be looking at what things were like in America after the Vietnam War. Our learning objective is to look at how the Vietnam War changed the way Americans dealt with other countries. And your starter is to answer the following question. You may want to do this in a couple sentences. What do you think? Does America start wars or do they wait a while and then choose sides? So let's go ahead and put our title, our learning objective, and write that starter down, and then we'll take that up momentarily. So go ahead and please. So taking a look at our starter, we're looking at America's involvement in a war from 1914 to 1918, and we know that as the First World War, which took place in Europe. 1939 to 1945, this of course was the Second World War in Europe. 1963 to 1975, this was the Vietnam War in Southeast Asia. And the year 2000, which just sort of concluded recently, this was considered to be called the War on Terror. This took place mainly in areas of Afghanistan and areas of Iraq. Now, America's involvement actually might surprise you. Well, they didn't get involved in the First World War until the year 1917. And America chose to wait until 1917 because they had a policy of isolationism. We're not going to get involved in the affairs of other nations, and only actually got involved because some of their merchant vessels that were traveling across the Atlantic were being sunk by German U-boats. We know America didn't get involved in the Second World War for the first 2 years. They only joined in 1941 after the attacks on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December. The USA held off for a year before getting involved in the war in Vietnam. And about the only conflict that America joined immediately was, in fact, the War on Terror. And that was because they were directly attacked by terrorist organizations from the Middle East. So you can go ahead and finish off your starter now. What do you actually notice about when America goes ahead and gets involved in conflicts? So finish off your starter, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and resume playing. We now have three key terms to look at. You can go ahead and complete these in your summary booklets. If you don't have your summary book, not to worry, write these down in your exercise book and you can finish these off in summary booklets when you have them present. Go ahead and pause the video now, have a guess at these three. You can go ahead and resume playing and we'll take them up together, giving you a few moments again to complete them. So you've had a chance. We're going to look at linkage first. Linkage is the name given to Nixon's attempts to make links between the various foreign policies he had, especially the ones surrounding Vietnam. So we're mainly talking about the Nixon Doctrine, Vietnamization, and Detente. This was an opportunity to try to get American soldiers out of Vietnam, but also to make sure that he was building stronger relationships with communist countries such as the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact was an alliance made in 1955 between the Soviet Union and Soviet states, and this did concern America because it meant they would need to use the policy of containment to try to stop the spread of communism. And superpowers, they are referring to the most powerful countries after 1945, and these are mainly going to be the big three: Britain, the USA, and the Soviet Union. And the North Vietnamese Army, that was a misdirect, so hopefully you didn't use that one. Go ahead and check you have these correct in your books. Pause the video now if you need some time. Otherwise, you can resume playing and we'll carry on together. So two important points for us to write down. During the 1970s, the USA supported a policy of improved relations with the Soviet Union, and this was known as détente. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis saw Americans develop a lot of fear over potential nuclear war, and they really wanted to work together with the Soviet Union to reduce the amount of weapons they had. But to do that, they would have to make an agreement. So there were two agreements that were part of the policy of détente. So one were known as the Helsinki Agreements, which we'll go into a little bit more detail of, and the SALT Agreements. So these were aimed to help both sides slowly reduce the amount of nuclear weapons they had. And lastly, Nixon actually paying a visit to China would also further strengthen relations. So please do go ahead and write those important points in your note. And when you're finished, resume playing. So as promised, we're going to look at the SALT agreements and the Helsinki agreements. We need, again, this information in our note. So SALT stands for Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. And a strategic arm is referring to just this over here that I will circle. It's referring to nuclear weapons. So they're going to limit the amount of nuclear weapons by signing a treaty together. The first set of agreements were set to limit the amount of nuclear weapons. They were looking to further improve this with further negotiations. The Test Ban Treaty of 1963, it said that the USA and Soviet Union and Britain, they signed an agreement saying they would stop testing nuclear weapons. They didn't say they would stop making, but they would stop testing. And lastly, the Helsinki Agreements of 1975. This increased understanding and confidence between the USA, and they focus on three main areas. We call these the baskets of the Helsinki Agreements. They focus on security, human rights, and cooperation. The Helsinki Agreements were designed to improve understanding because the USSR and USA fundamentally did not agree on a lot of things. They didn't actually understand each other. And these Helsinki Agreements were designed to help with that very understanding. So again, let's pause the video now, write down those important points we need, and resume playing when you're ready. So we're going to do a little historical sidestep. We're going to talk about relationships and love triangles. We can see a diagram of a love triangle here on the right-hand side. And there's really no winners in a love triangle. It's when you have person B likes person A and also likes person C, but person C doesn't like person B in return. Person C likes person A, and person A doesn't like person B back. So we have three people who all like different people and don't actually like each other, and it's a recipe for disaster. And we're going to look at a historical example of a love triangle between three different periods of the Cold War. So most importantly for us, we need to record down these 5 points. We need to know that there was a love triangle between the Soviet Union, the USA, and China. In the 1950s, the USSR and the USA, they were on really bad terms. We know that Stalin wasn't too happy about the secret being kept from him with the atomic bomb. The USSR and China were on good terms because they were both communist. China and the Soviet Union actually split over an invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968. Their relationship started to deteriorate, and the USA wanted better relations with China to end the war in Vietnam. Now, President Richard Nixon, he saw a rift. He saw a gap between the two communist superpowers, and he was ready to, as you want to say, slide in the DMs. He was ready to get in there and try and exploit that particular gap. So let's go ahead and record these points in our note. When we're ready, we can resume. So your job is to create your love triangle for the 1950s. So what we're going to do is look at the bottom. We can see here we have Khrushchev of the USSR and we have Mao Zedong of China. You don't have to draw their pictures, just write their names. And we need to know that they were allies and had similar values. So we're going to give them a thumbs up emoji. We're then going to look at the relationship between the USSR and Kennedy. We know there was a dispute over the Second World War and land agreements weren't reached. There was a fear of communism. We're giving them a thumbs down emoji. They were not friendly. And between the USA and China, we can see there were disputes over the Second World War. No trade was happening between the two countries. And there was a significant fear over the spread of communism. So they're going to get a thumbs down emoji as well. So go ahead and pause the video, record the following love triangle into your exercise book. And when you're ready, we will move on to the next one. So let's go ahead and have a look at our love triangle for the 1970s. So this is the start of the 70s. We can see relations are starting to strain between Khrushchev and Mao Zedong. China's really angry over with the USSR invading Czechoslovakia and said you shouldn't do that. You're going to cause an international incident and people are going to get a bad reputation about communism. We can see that nuclear war was narrowly averted during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and there was actually some sort of global peace and stability. Again, relations aren't great between the Soviet Union and the USA, but they're certainly starting to improve. Now, this is where we're going to see the biggest change between the USA and China. There was an event we call ping pong diplomacy. And the story goes the USA international ping pong team was in China for a global tournament. And the Americans, when they arrived in the airport, unfortunately, their ride didn't show up or there was something wrong with their ride. And they realized they couldn't actually get to their hotel. They don't speak Chinese. They're in a country that doesn't really like Americans, and they're feeling a little bit unsafe. And wouldn't you know, the Chinese ping pong team was also in the airport. And when they saw the Americans, they recognized their jumpsuits and said, hey guys, hop in with us. We'll drop you off at your hotel. And it was through that conversation that they actually agreed to have a friendly game of table tennis. It wasn't a competition, it was a friendly match. And what this showed Nixon and Mao Zedong is if our ping pong teams can actually play a friendly match together, maybe we can be friends also. And this was the invitation that Nixon needed to be the first US president in history to go ahead and visit China. So we're going to give them the kissing face emoji because their relationship is certainly starting to heat up. So go ahead and pause the video here, complete your love triangle for the early 1970s, and when you're finished, as always, resume playing. Now's the time for 1975. We're going to see the greatest change here. So Khrushchev and Mao Zedong. We've got Mr. Ford in the middle. We just put his face there because he has a very nice smile. Their relationship is no good. We're going to do the poop emoji. Their relations are changing as both begin talking with America. Now, the USSR would look to China and say, what are you doing? Why are you negotiating with America? You're communist. You shouldn't be talking to a capitalist nation. And China said in return, what are you doing? You're also talking to America. You shouldn't be doing that as a communist nation. The relations are starting to agree between both. The Helsinki agreements are creating more understanding, and trade markets open. This is the main reason why China actually has the manufacturing industry it does today, because US markets open to Chinese trade, and this meant they had to improve their factory systems. So here is our love triangle for 1975. Again, you have a few minutes to copy this down, and when you're finished, resume playing. So because it's such a strange story from history, we decided to spend a little bit more time on it. Here we have ping pong diplomacy. So before the 1970s, there had never been a US president actually go and visit China. And in April of 1971, this is where the Chinese table tennis team invited the USA to go and play a friendly match. It's very important that we make note of the fact that this was friendly. This was not to show whether capitalism or communism were better. This was not to show any kind of international superiority. This was simply a case of a friendly match. And it showed the president that China and the USA can actually work together. And this was the way that Nixon kind of got a foot in the door to have that stronger relationship with China. It came down to just a very odd interaction between two table tennis teams, but it allowed the two superpowers to start to work together and to sort out their differences. So your tasks fall into two steps. The first step you need to do is create some mind maps, and you're going to create those for Truman and the Marshall Plan. Remember, the Marshall Plan was giving Eastern European nations money to convert them to capitalism. The Berlin airlift, also known as the Berlin Crisis. Remember how the USA was flying in supplies to their sector of Berlin, which was being cut off by the Soviets. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the events around the Vietnam War, and the policy of détente, which we have covered earlier. So that's step one. When you do finish that, you'll also need to answer the following question: why relations between the USA and USSR changed after 1973? So the best way to do this is to pause the video, make your mind maps, and then answer the question. When you're finished everything on the slide, you can resume playing and we'll take up the question together. So explain why relations between the USA and USSR changed after 1973. Well, it was because of the strained relations between the Soviet Union and China. We know they didn't agree over the invasion of Czechoslovakia, and this is where Nixon saw that opportunity. These two communist nations who previously were allies are having a falling out, and I can sort of slide in between and start to build better relationships with each of them. Once they realize the other is talking to the USA, those relations will strain further, and I can strengthen understanding between the Soviet Union using the policy of détente. So do make sure that you have those mind maps completed, the 5 of them, and your response for the question posed.